for the Utah Center for the Book, and today I'm really excited to share with you the reading and writing from Heather Sappenfield, who joined us at the Park City Library to talk about her new book, The River Between Hearts. You can find that anywhere where you buy books. Thank you so much for Park City Library for having us, for our major donors for Utah Humanities. I hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Park City Library, everyone. I'm Trina Mack, Youth Services Librarian, and I'm thrilled to be partnering with the Utah Humanities Book Festival. Thank you so much for partnering with us to bring this tremendous author. We just had a delightful writing workshop, which I wrote a great short story, and I'm like, what? I didn't know I had that in me. So if this is half as inspiring as that, we're in for a treat. I would like to introduce Heather Matthias Sappenfield.
How many applause? Well, I am so pleased to be here. Thank you, Utah Humanities, and thank you, Park City Library, for bringing me here. I visited here this summer and absolutely loved it. And when I was invited back, I was like, yes, I will come. I love it there. So I'm really honored. And I'm here to talk to you about this book I wrote, this narrow little book called The River Between Hearts. Now, I have a question for you. So this book I wrote, the main character is 11-year-old Rill, almost 11-year-old Rill. She showed up, she wanted to tell the story, and I had to go, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But she's 11. She tells the story. And it's a big story that's going on in the world today. Because she's 11, because she tells the story in the present, this book is marketed as middle grade. I wrote it in her voice for everyone. So here's my question. What do you think would have happened to Kill a Mockingbird in our current marketing situation? What would have happened to that book?
Yep.
Young girl talking about and exploring those things from her perspective. They wouldn't have known what to do with that book. They wouldn't have known where to put it, how to market it. They would have said, she can't talk about this. She needs, maybe to tone down a little bit of language here, whatever it may be. And I view this book like that one, doing the same work, but it's a different world. And so, a lot of times it gets pigeonholed. I wrote it for everybody. So I just wanted to point that out. It's a narrow book because that's how the story worked, and it had to fit into a particular genre. But this is also as much as the story needed. And I'm really proud and happy to be here because the book has won the Nautilus Book Award, along with like Thich Nhat Hanh and the Dalai Lama and things like that. And it also won a Reading the West Award. Both of these awards are so meaningful for me because I wrote this book out of love for the Southwest and for communities like where I live in Vail, communities like Park City, but it could be literally anywhere around the Southwest, but it could stretch to anywhere in the United States as well. And so for it to get recognition, and I just hope more and more people read it because I feel as though the world needs that message today, even more this week than at any other time. So, I thought I'd just read to you from the author's note that's at the back of the book. I wanted to share that with you first because tonight I'm supposed to talk about how this book came to be and why I wrote it. I just taught a writing workshop about obsessions, and I always write from obsessions, and they tend to be things that I experienced. So far, they've tended to be things I've experienced when I was teaching high school, or things with other people, moments of connection or non-connection that didn't work, or whatever that might be, and they stick with me, and then I write about them later. So this is from the author's note. In the late 90s, I taught high school language arts. Each year, students who were new to America turned up in my classes. Some of them were undocumented, yet I became a teacher to help anyone with a desire to learn. These students were a marvel to me because despite knowing little, if any, English, and despite knowing few of the basics of daily life within the school, they managed to get by, often admirably, often while also working 1 or even 2 jobs after school. Some mornings I'd walk through the school's front doors to discover a group of them gathered in the lobby, crying and comforting each other because a family member, or maybe a few, had been rounded up for deportation the day or night before. I tried to imagine how that must have felt, being left behind in a foreign country with no documentation and no family. Later, these students would be in my class, trying to concentrate, learn, and continue on. Their courage amazed me. When I started writing novels, I knew this was a story I would someday explore. This is very much Rill's story of accepting grief and loss. It's her own grueling internal adventure, yet she has help. As in life, through her interactions with Perla, someone of a very different background, Rill gains a new and broader perspective that fosters compassion, helping her to heal and grow. Moments when we meet people who are different from us in nationality, in ethnicity, in spiritual belief, in social strata, define us. They have the potential to be among the most beautiful experiences available to us as human beings. So, that stayed with me. And I hadn't realized how much I'd internalized it until one day Rill, who is the protagonist of this story, showed up. She just showed up. I was talking with someone from the writing workshop that I have dyslexia, and I think one of the ways it expresses itself is characters and stories tend to come pretty broadly formed, like they're pretty full. And so she showed up, almost 11, stomping along the river, I mean, so vividly, and I could hear her voice, and I'm like, who are you? And it became apparent that she wanted to tell this story, and I was like, wait, no, you're too young. This happened in high school. She wouldn't give up. She just stayed, and she kept being in my mind. And finally, I was like, okay. And when I started to actually sit with her and write down the story, I realized she was perfect because she's young enough that there's just no politics involved. None whatsoever. They're just people. And that, I was like, wow, okay. But she was a tough character, and I'll get to that. So she was a mistake-making hoot, and I had to be with her quite a lot and figure out how she needed to tell the story. It ended up being in first person I, because the minute you step into third, I'm not with her anymore in that perspective of innocence, naivete. But I realized, holy moly, I'm gonna have to write this in the voice. I want it to be authentic. I want it to drive straight to the heart. And if I want that to happen, I need to figure out how an 11-year-old really thinks and talks, and it's been a while since I've been 11. I know a lot of kids, and I had one, but I haven't been there. So I started reading middle grade books. By the way, if you haven't and don't read much middle grade, do so, because there is just fantastic literature out there. In fact, I was saying earlier this evening also, I just met with a women's book club who read the book, and they're like, we're gonna read more of these, because you know what? It had as much as a regular book, except it's all condensed, and it's right there, and there was so much texture and so much going on. We're gonna do this a few times a year. And I was like, yes, awesome. The other reason I feel like it's also good to read middle grade books, and things get pigeonholed, right? So it's actually reading a book from a younger perspective, is that we as adults tend to approach those stories from places that are less guarded. We feel like, oh, this is a story for a younger person. And so we open up a little more. We let some of those preconditioned things that we know, we don't hold them as tightly around ourselves. We don't cloak ourselves as much. And the way these stories are written, There's not a lot of extra language. There's still plenty of texture. There's still plenty going on because there's these young, hungry minds. But it's just direct and to the point, you know. And there can be beautiful language, but it has to be in service only of the story, never in service of the author or some sort of artistic movement. And so, yeah, it's just they're good to read and remind ourselves of those things. So I recommend middle grade books, and that's middle grade, right? Books with younger people as the main characters again. So I read middle grade books. I hung out a bunch. I taught some writing workshops in my husband's school, Vail Mountain School, and just listened. And what I really listened for when I was hanging out with those young people was what I didn't hear. You know, what was I expecting that wasn't there? And that really showed me more than listening for what my expectations were, or what I thought should be there. And that was cool. I was surprised sometimes they had more rules for themselves, like they're already trying to crack down with rules for themselves or learn it, you know, because this age, by the way, middle grade books, defining the world. Young adult, the world's defined, angst, how am I going to fit in it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Adult world, oh, the world is really tough. Let's look back on it with nostalgia. Just FYI. So those are the divisions and sort of how the thematically they work. So yeah. So I really so hard. This is the hardest book I've written. This is my fourth one. I've written 2 young adult novels, an adult short story collection, and then this book. This was the hardest one to write because I wanted to get her voice exactly right. The writing had to be so clean and yet so honest and to the point. If there was any turn of phrase or anything that goes on, it always has to happen through action in a story like this, and through the movement of the story itself. And so there's you just can't be sloppy. And so it took me a long time to get it right, but I'm so happy with how things have turned out. I wonder if you would like to hear the first 3 chapters?
Yes, please.
All right. They're short, by the way. Oh, it's only 60 pages.
It's a perfect night.
Curl up. No, they're short chapters, so in all it's about 12 or 13 pages, I think, at the most.
Would you like a chair?
No, I'm going to keep standing here. I'm all good. Besides that, Case will have to move his filming. All right, chapter 1. My treehouse fort cruise wasn't far from home if you had wings. But if you were stuck on the ground, stubby cliffs blocked the way, so the trail looped around. Behind me, the creek nagged, rill, 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 making me mad enough to spit. Rose bushes scratched my arms and legs, and spider webs stuck to my face. Clifford shot between my shins, making me scream like a girl, which I guess was all right because I am one, but still. Give me a break, I shouted at that crazy cat. Really, though, I was shouting at the whole dang world. And then there I was at Fort Cruz. I forgot how much I loved its cheery golden color, forgot the roof was the big gray plastic one off our playhouse from when Eddie and me were little, forgot we'd painted the shutters sky blue. The flag with the K Mom had sewn snapped on the breeze. At the ladder, I peered up. Handprints, Eddie's, Mom's, Dad's, and mine, waved from the floors underneath. I looked down at my sneakers, swallowing, because those hands seemed so happy to see me. I climbed the rungs and nudged up the trap door, lifting it higher, higher, till it fell, banging against the floor. I shuffled to a window and unhooked its shutters. Sunshine exploded across the hammock, table, and one stump chair. The other stump chair lay on its side against the wall from when I kicked it last September. There was the shelf with our family photo and my 4 drawings hanging on the walls. Everything was just how I left it, except the air. That seemed better, cleaner. I dragged the stump chair back to the table and walked up the sunbeam to look out the window. Dad always called this the eagle's view. I opened the next set of shutters and took in the view from there. Opening the last set, I looked out on home. Our company's building reminded me of a big brown pencil box, except with a green metal roof for a lid. Off its back corner, the snowmobiles for winter tours were parked in rows. Off its other corner, bright blue river rafts were stacked on the one trailer that hadn't been hauled away by a van stuffed with guests. I could also see the back side of the cruise whitewater adventure sign at the 2-lane highway, the dirt road in, and the bridge across the creek. I filled my chest with the smells of trees and plants and animals busting awake after the long winter. At a ruckus on the ladder, I flinched. Of course, my slingshot was in my backpack against the opposite wall. Breathing fast, I watched a paw reach through the door, then another as Clifford clawed his way in, ears flat back from how hard he worked. "Don't scare me like that," I scolded. "Meow," he replied, like, "I'll do whatever I please," and he strode around, inspecting everything. I plopped onto a stump chair, resting my elbows on my knees and my chin in my hands. Then I could feel our family photo staring down at me. Twisting around, I stared right back. I'd been 9 in that photo. Real crude, shortest person in 3rd grade. A year and 26 days had gone by since Gus took it, and I'd been careful to stay exactly the same. I whispered to Dad, giant beside me up there, "Come home for my birthday, okay? Please?" I heard a swishy sound and froze. After a few seconds, there it was again. The 3rd time, my heart about stopped because I realized it was coming from the hammock. Chapter 2. Pretending to look out a window, I watched the hammock bulge. I felt for my whistle at my chest, but of course, I'd thrown it away. Sliding on my backpack, being super obvious, I said, "Come on, Clifford," same as when we left on our daily stroll to the mailbox. I climbed down the ladder, nervous clear to my fingers and toes, listening for whatever hid in the hammock to attack me. At the bottom, I looked up. Clifford peered down. "Meow," he said, like, "Seriously? You're leaving?" "Clifford," I whispered, "come on." But he just stared with his lifesaver green eyes. "Suit yourself." I took off for home. After a few steps, though, I paused. Whatever was in that hammock might hurt Clifford. It might even eat him. "Clifford," I called, but he did not come. Gritting my teeth, I slid off my pack and dug inside for my slingshot. Then I thought how the fort was actually pretty small, so I might not have enough room to shoot. I zipped my pack closed and searched around till I found a stick, big and thick enough to swing, but also light enough to drag up the ladder. Climbing the rungs, I cursed that cat. He was the whole reason I'd come there in the first place. Near the top, I listened again. Was that purring? Inching my head through the doorway, I saw that something was definitely still swishing in the hammock. I listened again. That was purring, but I couldn't spot Clifford. The camouflage pattern made it hard to tell the shape of what hid inside, but it seemed big. I stepped in, raising the stick, ready to swing, and took 2 slinky steps. Nothing happened. The purring got louder. I slumped 2 steps closer. Nothing happened. The purring got even louder. I slumped 2 steps more. I cocked back the stick for a home run, but stopped. If I clobbered that hammock, Clifford might get hurt. Plus, if he was purring, whatever hid in there obviously wasn't eating him. Still, my palms were slippery with sweat as I changed to a sword grip. Imagining Joyce saying, "Ready, go," I jabbed, lightning fast. The thing in the hammock screamed. I screamed. Clifford yowled as he and a body spilled onto the floor. That cat zoomed to the far windowsill like a pufferfish with a broomstick tail. The body rolled onto its hands and knees. Her hair was black and tangly, but her eyes were even tanglier. Slow and careful, she stood up. She was only a bit taller than me and seemed about my same age. She wore jeans with a belt and a t-shirt that read Los, then 2 more words hidden in a wrinkle. Above that was a photo of 4 men, 2 of them holding guitars. For a minute, that girl and I tried to murder each other with dirty looks. Then she shivered. Her chin lifted all proud, and the shivering stopped. Proud? Of breaking into my fort? Get out of here, I shouted. Her hand shot up like she was under arrest, and she started inching sideways, making for the trap door. Then she disappeared down the ladder. I swooped over the doorway, just in time to see her skip the last rung and hit the ground sprinting. But she didn't head in the direction I expected. No, she ran deeper into the forest. Chapter 3. Blowing out a humongous breath, I let the stick clunk to the fort's floor. Sweat coated me, so to cool down, I squirmed off my backpack. I'd seen that girl before, at school. And then it came to me why. Because of my ex-friend Whitney. Last year, just before winter break, Whitney and her popular friends had been standing in a clump in the hallway, crinkling their noses at a new student. Popular became a huge deal in 4th grade, by the way, and Whitney was the queen of who was popular and who wasn't. With what had happened in Fort Cruz, I definitely wasn't. Plus, it all seemed so dumb. And then boys started liking girls and girls started liking boys. I swear, it was ridiculous because we'd known each other since kindergarten. I tried to ignore it all, to just stay me, but every time I turned around, there it was. I'd never been so glad for field day, school's last day, to come along. But of course, the popular girls, plus the girls who wanted to be popular, just stood around whispering and giggling. Not me. I won 7 blue ribbons. Anyway, there they were, standing in the hall before lunch, looking at the very girl who spilled out of my hammock. Concentrating on that memory, I moseyed over to the hammock and plopped in sideways, the way Eddie and I used to when we both wanted to lie there at once. I prickled, remembering the dirty look Whitney shot me that day, just as something rolled into my lap. Boy, did I holler out of that hammock. Clifford watched like I was hilarious. Don't laugh, I snapped at him. This is all your fault anyway. Using the stick, I tugged back the hammock's edge and spied a white plastic sack, the kind Mom and Joyce carried in from their shopping trips to the grocery store. Like it might bite, I lifted it out, set it on the table, and just stared at it because going through a stranger's stuff felt creepy. Still, I needed to find out about this girl who'd been hiding in my fort. I pulled out another t-shirt with the same photo of the men. There was Los written below it again. The next word was Padres, but the last word, was it can't? I'd learned enough Spanish in school and listened to Joyce enough to know Los meant the and Padres meant dads. The dads can't? Next, I pulled out a pair of jeans, a pair of underwear, a pair of nubbly socks, a hairbrush, 3 chewy granola bars, an empty water bottle, and a little white teddy bear with a stitched rectangle on its chest that was 1/3 green, 1/3 white, and 1/3 red. In the middle white third was a stitched brown bird with spread wings. That empty sack drooped on the table like a tired balloon. The way its 8 things spilled from it reminded me of when Eddie caught trout and cleaned out their guts in the creek. Something about that sack and its guts made me slump, feeling like I might never rise again. As I stared at the girl's stuff, what Alyssa said to Whitney that day at school came back to me. Another one? She'd said it real loud on purpose, and the girl had looked at Alyssa with the same expression she'd given me here in the fort. But then Whitney did something that made me stare. She said just as loud, "Shut up, Alyssa. and nodded to the girl like, sorry. Then she caught me watching. I remembered going over and over the way Whitney had scolded Alyssa. I couldn't get over how rotten it must have made Alyssa feel, but I'd never once thought about how that new girl might have felt. I didn't even know her name. Clifford hopped into my lap, prancing back and forth, holding his tail so it tickled my face. Not now, I muttered. Still, my head came to his back and he started to purr. This girl sure seemed to be on the run. What things would I pack if I ran away? More food. Definitely more food. Then again, maybe there wasn't any food at home to take. Or maybe she didn't have time to pack food. Or maybe she ate all her food. Maybe maybe the stuff in this bag really was like fish guts. Maybe she needed it to survive. Yeah. So, a nugget to consider. So in spring of 2023, I was in schools up and down the valley where I live with my local bookstore. And I think I was in 8 schools. In one of them, 2 days before, there had been a raid. And there were students, 2 students whose parents were taken. So lest you think that this doesn't really go on, or it doesn't go on now, it goes on. And that was a tough visit. I mean, we really talked about some things. And so just so you know, it goes on. And I guess my question to you right now is, if you were real, what would you do? What would you do in that moment there, where you're holding that bag?
And go find her.
Look for her. Yeah. I would ask the kids that, and they would all, oh yeah, someone will be trying to be cool. Oh, I keep it, or I throw it away, whatever. But for the most part, they would say yeah. And some of them would say, I'd go get more food and some more warm clothes, and I'd put it in there and I'd take it to her. Yeah. Which, is so heartwarming. Another nugget to consider, and this will lead me into the next section of the talk. The first school I was at, which was directly across I-70 from Vail Mountain, we're looking out at the ski runs, right? And we're heading into a point where I'm going to ask you about your background, right? How you came to be here in the United States. And all the hands shot up. It was great. The whole gym floor is full of kids, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade at this school. And all the hands shoot up, and I point the very first kid I ask, and he says, well, my mom and my grandma came to this country from Korea because it was like a war and there was no food and everybody was being killed.
Oh.
That was the last thing I expected. And yet, here they are, escaping, trying to build a life, right? So, it just, all around us are people who are doing these things and going through these things. So, I just want to share a little bit about myself and my story. So, if you see my first 2 books, they're just Heather Sappenfield. And then my next 2 books are Heather Matthews Sappenfield, my short story collection, and then this one. So, I actually wrote this book, and then my short story collection got published, and then this won a contest and got published. But the story of Matthews, that's my maiden name. And it's my grandfather's story. It's Portuguese. His family agreed to be indentured servants for Dole, and they went to Hawaii and picked pineapple for 5 years. He and his 4 brothers and sister. And then after 5 years, Dole sponsored them coming to Orange County, California. So I don't know if you've been around pineapple a whole lot, but it's pretty unpleasant to harvest and pick pineapple, especially that long. They did all this for a better life, to get out. They arrived in Orange County to such prejudice that it was unbelievable. And they Americanized their name to Matthews, and my grandpa, they ended up picking oranges and all that. My grandpa would never talk about it. I only learned about this at his memorial service. When we started to see more family, he would never talk about it. He was so ashamed, and it was so scarring for him. And I was working on this book at the time, and I thought, well, thank you, because I live in Vail, and I have a pretty good life. And so it made me want to honor that, and to bring that back, and to bring it in the form that it originally was in. So Heather Mateus Sappenfield, that's my maiden, my maiden name, and I'm proud to have that part of my writing name now. And so I ask you, how did you end up in this beautiful library, in this beautiful place in the United States of America? Most of us, unless we're Native American or African American, came by somebody's choice, right? So, Debbie, how'd you get up here?
Just trying to think the story. So I had grandparents that came from Norway, and so my mom's first generation. And then on the other side, I have a great grandpa that was a trail guide. I guess I don't know how they got here, but we go back as far as Missouri, and there was 13 of them living in a dugout.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I moved here from Colorado.
Perfect.
My grandparents on my father's side came from Poland, because they were like, this is very unpleasant, let's leave. And then on my mom, he grew up on the south side of Chicago. My dad did.
World War II?
I think so. And the south side, they lived in the Polish community on the south side of Chicago, where the whole crew was. And then my mom's side of the family came from Europe. I'm unsure when, but yeah, they were all like farmers and traveled around, and then the Dust Bowl hit, and then they moved, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. How about you? Do you want to share?
I know places we've come from, but I don't know when. My family doesn't talk about our family very much. And it's interesting. We just don't, and I don't push it because my parents grew up in the South, and they don't want to talk about what they've seen. So that's why they came out west.
Yeah. One thing I find that we as Americans all have in common is that we are descendants of the ones who left. And we all have that thread of that willing to make that change. Because think about it, when they came, depending upon when they came across an ocean on a boat, depending whenever they came, it was much harder and scarier. I mean, even now, just going to a new country to start a new life would be terrifying. Yeah, well, scary, unsettling.
Yes.
Back in the day, did they walk down from the north? Did they walk up from the south? What did they face? What oceans did they cross? And then once they got here, usually the new immigrant population faced horrible prejudice and repression and all of that stuff, right? And were exploited. So it's just, I feel how lucky we are to be at this point, and yet all around us are still people that are doing that right now. And one of the reasons I wrote this book was just to bring, well, let's put it this way. When I had that experience where I saw the students in the lobby at the school, and I went home that night, and I really thought about how I had the luxury of ambivalence. I had the luxury of even indifference or casual care. And, we don't all have to be out there, changing the world, but just to view the people surrounding us with compassion and empathy as our equals. We just happen to be farther, a couple generations farther down the path, and lucky. How lucky we are, right? But that could have been our grandpa or our grandma. And so that's what I wanted to really bring, because our community is very much runs and works because of that immigrant population.
Same here.
And so I just really wanted to bridge that and sort of create that compassion among people. A moment just of clarification: sympathy, empathy, right? Sympathy implies sort of a pity, which implies a sense of superiority. Sympathy is, you're still not there. Empathy, that's where you open your heart and you view that other person as equal to you. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, and I was like willing to go through it. Yeah, okay, let's get in the schools. Let's start this young. Let's talk about this in the schools, but it's meant for all ages, for all of us to read. And so that's why it's there. One other thing I wanted to also tell you, another reason that I wrote adventure. So she has adventures, and Rill does. And her father was an adventurer, and his best friend Gus is around, and they talk quite a lot about adventures, and her family owns a rafting company. Adventure's a big thing, right? And in this community here, in skiing, we have adventures, right? We like it. We ski and we bike ride and we do all these things, and inherent in it, you know, is the risk of crashing or hurting yourself or whatever it might be, but it's fun. We're testing ourselves physically, right? And we do this for recreation, for the most part. And part of the fun is also that it's a risk, right? And so every once in a while we lose somebody, and it's very sad, and it's in the newspaper, and there's big memorial services, right? Well, that other population is on a big adventure too, but they're here to create a better life and to survive. The adventurers are toying with gravity and going fast, and these people are toying with governments and lives and families, and things happen with them, and we tend to not hear a thing. This is like the invisible population. And so I also wanted to bring those two adventuring worlds into sort of a meeting place and a harmony, and a recognition of each other as well. So I wanted to bring those two together. So, yeah. So, I guess in the end, my message with the book, and my hope that, and the reason I wrote the book from the perspective, I said, okay, Rill, we'll do this together. And I worked so hard to get her voice, the voice of an 11-year-old, so that she could remind us all that we, all of us, are simply desiring a good, meaningful life.
Ah, so good.
You're welcome.
So good. Oh, does anyone have any questions or anything? Ladies, gentlemen?
How did you get into writing?
You know what? I have been writing since I was a little girl. And it's just always been what I did. Books and things like that have always just been who I am and what I am. It was my escape, I think, a lot when I was younger. Childhood. I had a writer's childhood. And it was an escape and a place for me to be. Like, we didn't get to do sports or anything like that. And we were just, so, yeah. So I always wrote. I didn't write very well. But yeah, when I went to college, I was going to be a journalist, but I couldn't get my head around the constant invasion of people's privacy, and then how everything has a slant, whether you like it or not. So you're invading someone's privacy, and then you're slanting things.
Yeah.
So, granted, there's great journalism out there, but it wasn't for me. So then I went into English education, But so I started writing seriously. Here's a long answer, we're going around.
Stories
I was
are good.
teaching English, saw these things, had my daughter, was still working full-time as a teacher. When she was about a year old, she started talking with the Australian accent of her daycare lady.
Oh.
And I went, I need to start spending more time with my daughter. And so I resigned from my position, and at that point, when she napped, I started writing quite a lot, and trying and working at it. And I had some close calls with editors, but things just weren't quite coming together. And finally, I went for my master's in fiction writing at Pacific University. And that, my third semester there, I started winning awards and getting published, and everything just went from there.
Wow.
So, yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I don't know. I can't speak for everybody, but we writers are weird. And you kind of just know it early on, and you're perfectly, like, if I'm having a good writing day, I am still in my bathrobe at 12:30, and I've maybe eaten a little bit, and the UPS guy's walking by my, front door, and I'm like, oh gosh, I gotta get dressed, this is embarrassing. So we're just, for me, solitary, kind of odd ducks. So, yeah.
Well, that works in a mountain town.
It does, it works really well, yes, yeah.
Especially those cold winter nights. And
Uh-huh.
I'm like, how am I gotta find a way to get out of my place.
See, I cannot write at night. I have to write first thing in the morning. Anything I write, I can edit really well at night, but anything I write at night is pretty precious. Doesn't work very well for me, but at the same time, I can start getting sleepy at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
So.
She's like, you guys, I'm sleeping.
Time for you to go.
I start getting sleepy at 7:44.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
What are you working on next, or do you have any inspirations that are working through you right now for your next work?
Well, I'm actually in the final stages of another, here's my deal.
Okay, go.
These characters arrive,
Yeah.
these voices, these people that want to tell stories. It's weird. I've done weird. It's kind of like channeling in a way, I guess.
But I also love it.
And so thus it's kind of career suicide, but like 2 young adult novels, a short story collection, and this is marketing, right?
Yeah.
And now this middle grade book, right? But really, I'm just writing the stories that want to be told, and so my next book actually is adult humor.
Yeah.
And I love to write humor. It's really fun. Of course, there's a lot of intersections of people and meaningful relationships, and there's a lot of social commentary and really fun. And so that's my next book, and I need to decide the route I want to bring it. My first 2 books, I had an agent, and then these last 2 books, I've won awards. They've won contests to be published. So I need to decide what route I want to take with that book, and then it's probably a few months before it's ready to be marketed that way. But there is another young person's book that it's kind of been whispering in the back of my mind, and that actually, again, linking to my grandfather, would be in Portugal during the dictatorship and the overthrow of the dictatorship.
Oh.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
I was lucky enough to be a fellow with Zank Books and to go to be at their part of their writing conference.
Yeah.
And it just stuck with me, that world, and they would be these places like, oh yes, this is where they met, and they whispered when the trolley went by, to plan the overthrow of the dictatorship and things like that. It's just so fascinating. So that's still working, I think, within me as well. So I think that might be the next.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Wow. So you went to Portugal, and you were in Portugal, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Did you know a lot of the history, or did you go there and then meet the people and hear their stories?
No, I didn't know a lot of the Portuguese history, and I didn't, at that point my grandfather was still alive and he hadn't talked about things very much. I just knew I was Portuguese, and I went, it's a marvelous program. At that point it was about bringing writers of Portuguese descent from America to Portugal to interact with their Portuguese writers. And then through that, to have us write more about Portugal here, kind of, because Portugal was still echoing a bad rap.
Yeah.
And you may have noticed people are traveling to Portugal more
Yep.
suddenly. You know, like it works. Like they were really working to improve their
Yeah.
reputation, so to speak, or the perception of them. And so, and that was part of that. It was really fun, really fun. We were like in the U.S. Embassy and the British Embassy, you know, and reading for each other, and it was a really neat
I'm
experience.
so sorry, family. I'm going to have to go to Portugal for the next year to read this book. So sorry.
So
Thank
still,
you.
yes, I'm heading out.
Oh,
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Any other questions or anything? This has been such a treat. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been like, and there's just so many parallels too, like that it's just very impactful, so thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Please sign my book.
Absolutely.
Yay!